Greetings in Christ. My name is Bishop Nectarios, and this video is meant to address the current state of affairs in our world today. Specifically, I want to talk about the attitude that our secular nation tries to impress upon you in regards to having faith or religion, and why this runs counter to what being a Christian actually means. Now, the first thing I want to get into is I want to tell you that this channel is brand new. So don't expect any fancy bells or whistles yet because we're still trying to figure out how to do a lot of the editing and fancy stuff. But if you're joining us for the first time, please like and hit the subscribe button. We have a lot more videos coming out. And I think the next 2 weeks are already spoken for, and we have more on the drawing board. We've had a lot of topics presented to us, and I would also like to encourage you to suggest topics for me to discuss. You can do that in the comment section below. But as I said, my name is Bishop Nectarios, and I am a bishop of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Nations. So let's get into it. Now, society in the United States has this kind of secular mentality where faith should be something that should be kept strictly to Sundays and out of the public venue, which is ridiculous because that runs counter to pretty much everything that Christ told us to do. They try to encourage you to see faith as this dangerous thing that can cause public division, and therefore it should be isolated and contained. And that is a secular world point that is fairly socialist in attitude, but the reality is this. If faith is really the cornerstone of who you are, if love of God is the cornerstone of who you are, then you can't remain silent. But if you open your mouth, you're labeled as being a radical, and society will start to not want to accept you or to spend time around you because you're a Jesus freak. Now, here's a couple of problems. Christianity shoots their wounded a lot. And that's because they're trying to follow Christ, but they miss the entire point of it completely. They're so obsessed with following every single rule precisely as it's written that they break the backs of their people by following the rules. The rules are there for a reason, and they assist the church in its work, but there are times when the rules prevent souls from coming to heaven. And that's why, at least in the Orthodox Church, we have the doctrine of economia. So the world, I've even seen some people call themselves recovering Catholics or recovering Christians. And that treats it as if it's this dangerous thing that you have to recover from your addiction to. And again, you fall and prey to the world's secular viewpoint because the church threatens that. The church threatens the world's secular viewpoint that you're your own God, which, by the way, is a tenet of Satanism. And if you doubt me, you can read for yourself what they believe. The world hates it when you remind people, no, you are sinners, you are fallible, you do make mistakes, we all do. And we're all trying to love God, and we're all trying to pursue God. The secular world hates it when it wants to do something like murder its own unborn, and we say, no, all life is sacred, including the baby in the womb. And that baby has done nothing wrong to deserve death. The world hates us when we say that anything other than feel-good Christianity And this is nothing new. Since the year zero, the church has been actively persecuted for telling the truth. When they said you should stop doing these things, they're not in your best interest, and God hates these things anyway. And I'll give you a great example. The church suggests that you should stay away from excessive alcohol consumption. And that runs against this I want to do what I want to do attitude that's common all over the world. So what becomes of it? You decide, well, I'm going to drink on my own. But then you have people who get smashed on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning they're in church asking forgiveness, and then Sunday night they're smashed again. And this is that conflict that's brought forth between the way the world sees things and the way God sees things and the church sees things. And before all else, we follow God. We follow His faith. We follow His teachings. We don't follow the world's teachings. We don't follow a political leader's teachings. We don't necessarily even follow a religious leader's teachings unless his teachings match up with the teachings of God. So I get a little confused sometimes when I see people behaving like the church is this thing to be contained. But then when you're in need, you come to the church for help because we have food drives, we have clothing drives, we have homeless shelters, we have medical care facilities, whether that's psychiatric or strictly medical. We are the people who are there at the worst. We are the people who have endured centuries of being murdered for our faith. And this society thinks that it can decrease us through social influence. And to some extent, humans are very social creatures. They don't want to feel like they're being isolated or excluded from the community because we're tribal by nature. The problem is that you're exchanging a few years of pleasure being accepted by people who hate the faith. Whether that's passively or actively hating the faith is irrelevant. Their actions show their feelings about the faith. If you love God, you love His teachings, you follow Him. The church is that organization on the planet, and yet you turn away from the things of God, and you do it for the dumbest reasons, to be honest. One of the favorites is, I left church because the people there were this and that. Well, you're following God. You're not following people, are you? And the church is a hospital for sinners, not a country club for saints. But secular wisdom tried to say that we're all a bunch of hypocrites because we preach this and we do that. And they ignored the fact completely that, like all people who are working to achieve something greater, we slip and fall sometimes. And that the church is there to provide the authentic teaching of God. It's there to provide access to the sacraments. And it is there to tend to those in need. Now, what part about that is snide? It's because it goes against the current of what society wants. Society wants temporal pleasures. Society wants to do whatever they want to do and act like there is no God, and then at the last minute try to pray like crazy on your deathbed to escape consequences. Society doesn't want to hear that there's consequences. And indeed, let's take an example. Would the AIDS epidemic have spread as far and as fast as it did if people adhered to the traditional Christian views on marriage and sexuality? Nope. It would have been completely hindered by a society that doesn't have sex until marriage. But society, secular logic says sex before marriage is acceptable. And I'm sure we've all made that sin. At what point are you going to realize that society is all about doing whatever feels good, not whatever brings you closer to God? And you allow yourself to be distracted by these erroneous teachings by people who have no faith, by people who have no substance. All they really want is their next high, or their next drunk, or their next fancy meal, or their next fancy clothes, or fancy car, or some other expensive status symbol that they think is going to make them look better in the eyes of their people, when in reality all it really does is attract people's envy. And some people, believe it or not, thrive on envy. They want people to be envious of them because they have this brand new fancy thing. And they can't wait to see the look on the face of so-and-so. That's worldly logic. That's what you want to follow? Not a God who says, I love you and I've known you since before you were in the womb, and I formed you and I want you to be saved. That's the God that you're rejecting in order to follow the God of secular life, which is the devil, actually. If you think about it, free sex, go and chase booze and alcohol all you want, keep religion out of everything. What does that sound like? Hedonism. That sounds like man acting according to his base and carnal instincts. That's literally satanic theology. I mean, literally. Right out of their satanic Bible. You can look it up yourself. You are following the devil. Your faith is central to who you are. And your faith should form the cornerstone of your decisions. Because you are a Christian who is interacting with the world. But as a Christian, the Bible clearly states that we are in the world but not of the world. And because of that, the world's going to hate us. I'll give you a great example. Have you noticed in life how people will spend $2 to keep you from making $1? One example that was given to me recently was affiliate marketing. It used to be that if you clicked on the link and it would bring you over here and you made a purchase, they would get a commission because of the affiliate marketing. But the people were deleting that link because they figured, why should this person get a commission, even though they weren't paying any extra for their purchase? This commission came from the company, not from you. So you were spending more time to make sure that the person who introduced you to the product doesn't get credit for it. And so we have to ask, why are you following the God of the world? In the end, you're going to end up in hell. Secular logic is unacceptable. Secular logic leads you into hedonistic behaviors. And if you follow the world, you're going to end up in what the world loves, which is carnal behaviors. If you follow God, it's true that you're going to have to give up an awful lot that this world offers. But you're looking for eternity, and it does not make sense to exchange an eternity in heaven for a few good years on earth. I can't stress this enough. And we're all guilty of falling into that sin from time to time. I'll give you another great example is pastors who want to try to become ultra-liberal because they think it's going to pack the pews of their church. But you lose that authenticity. And the ultimate expression of that is exactly why the church is devalued in United States culture today. Because you see pastors on TV hitting people with their jackets and coats and knocking demons out of people and sucker punching crippled folks, as one comedian put it, to strike the devil out of you. And people look at that and go, this is a scam. This is a joke. Because there's no authenticity to that faith. Did you ever wonder how and why, when you read about our forefathers, the faith was in everything. When they were explorers, they trusted God to provide for them and guide them. When they were warriors, they trusted that God would either give them victory or shortly receive them into heaven. Everything they did was because the faith was the core of their component in being. And what society has taught you to do is to compartmentalize. Here's you, here's your faith. Keep them separate. There's you in society, and there's faith on Sunday and no other day. And don't talk about religion. Whatever you do, don't talk about religion. Don't talk about the single most important thing in our lives. The thing that informs our decisions, helps us decide what is the correct way to respond to people, whether or not we should help other people, whether or not we should accept help from other people, how we love, how we cherish people, how we see the world, how we interact with the world, how we cherish the gifts that we're given. And you want to turn that off so that society is not afraid that you might accidentally give them something that's beautiful. You know, when you crack open the New Testament, you read about Christ's life, about the beginning of the church, about its expansion, and the teachings that they believed. When you read sacred tradition, you read the organic tapestry of how the church has expanded. over the centuries. And when it was met with difficult questions, questions that weren't simple or answered simply, they sat down and they came to a consensus, and that became the ecumenical councils of the undivided church. And we have volumes of teachings from the saints, holy men who walked the path that God has laid out for us, and this is their collected wisdom. As a matter of fact, I've often talked about the Philokalia, which is what, 1100 years of concentrated wisdom in one spot. I think it was from like the 4th to the 15th century is when they compiled the Philokalia. And the wisdom in just volume 4 is breathtaking in its complexity. And as you read it, it begins to make sense. Don't let society tell you what your faith is. Do not let society determine by peer pressure of all things what you believe. Don't let society keep you muzzled and keep you from saying things. If you believe in God, speak your truth. Speak your faith. Become radical in your faith. And when I say radical, I don't mean the terrorists. I mean you believe, and you're not ashamed of believing, and you're capable of putting yourself out there as a Christian. And when they try to throw it in your face, educate yourself about your faith. Study it so that you know how to respond when they try to say these things. Because I'll tell you this, the vast majority of people make these comments without really thinking about it because they've been programmed by society. We're all socialized individuals programmed by society to behave a certain way. And they've been taught to be cynical and snide, so these comments come out of their mouth without them really thinking about it. And when you challenge it, they step back for a minute. And what they're doing is they're thinking about how best to shut you up. But then they have to consider your argument in order to shut you up. And they start to realize, oh, he's actually saying the truth. And that begins an unfortunate process, doesn't it? Because now you have to look at what society's been telling you and asking yourself, well, this doesn't make sense. Society is saying this, but the church is saying that. Why is the church saying that? So you look it up and you find out, oh, the church is saying this to prevent a greater evil from happening. Like, why shouldn't you covet your neighbor's belongings? Because if you covet it enough, that leads to stealing. And if you covet it too much, you take an unhealthy interest in other people's things. And you share a lack of gratitude for the gift that you have. When you covet your neighbor's things, it becomes something that's never enough. You have to have the next latest, coolest thing, either to acquire what your neighbor has or to better what your neighbor has. And most people don't realize why it is. They don't realize the danger that they bring upon their own soul. God loves you, and He's given you free will. You can choose to reject Him if that's what you absolutely want to do. But there are consequences to that. We are creations of God, and this is our testing ground. This is our proving ground. This is where we, as human beings, are to learn and to grow and to prepare for the life beyond. This is a challenge. This is a test. And different people have different tests. That's why some of us are wealthy and some of us are not. That's why some of us are very gifted at certain things and some of us are awful at them. And we have to work hard to build a basic skill set. In the end, I want you to embrace your faith. I want you to live your faith. I want you to live your faith in the same way that you live with air or water. I want you to embrace your faith with the same need that you have when you need to eat. I want you to look at God and I want you to realize how much He loves you, at least to within the bounds of our capacity. Because we're only capable of loving to a certain point, and God's capable of loving infinitely. And this secular world fashion is because what happened in secular society, people get screwed over all the time. They get manipulated, they get treated like crap, and they start to say that you have to harden yourself in order to survive. Sure, but when you harden yourself, what happens next? You become a target because now everybody wants to take you down to look tougher than you. There's that envy of our neighbor showing up again. Love God, love your neighbor. If you do these things, the other 10 commandments will take care of themselves. As a matter of fact, the whole of the law is based on love. That doesn't mean that we condone sinful behavior. That doesn't mean we make excuses for sinful behavior. That doesn't mean that we accept their behavior. But at the end of the day, we love our neighbor, regardless of whether they're a sinner or not. And that's the message that needs to be put forward. Just because we love you doesn't mean we agree with you. Our teachings of God teach us this, so that's what we're going to do. Don't let society tell you what to do. Look at society. It's a god-awful mess. Just an awful, awful mess. And this is what you want to follow? This deeply divided mess that we're seeing right now, a battle between socialists and capitalists? That's what you want to make your life about? How about eternity in heaven? How about love of God? How about love of your neighbor? How about tending to those in need? How about supporting the church in its mission to do the same? How about spending time doing things that are just for your spiritual gain and benefit and not constantly chasing a paycheck? Well, that's it for today. God loves you and I love you. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time, folks, take care. God bless. Bye.